I say over the years, I've said, like, there's only three questions in real estate. It's what's for sale, how much is my house worth, and how's the market? And at Altos, we do how's the market, and we help you answer how's the market. So, when clients are saying, they're saying, wow, I hear that it's a really tough market for buyers out there. You can answer that question with data. That's a how's the market question. Or they say, I hear it's cooling off. You can answer that question with data. Those are how's the market questions. And so those are opening questions. Those are lead conversion questions. Those are those opportunities to establish yourself as the expert in the market. So
there we go. We are finally live on Facebook. Thank you, LabCoatAgents today. I'm excited for this webinar because we're going to talk about some stuff that everybody's been talking about for about a year and a half now. Basically, since the pandemic started, we're all talking about low inventory and the issues. And today we're going to talk with Mike and Robert about the low inventory and some data behind it. So maybe we can get a little idea of how things are going to go forward. So a couple of housekeeping things here on LabCoats. Every one of these is recorded, and we will have a replay on our YouTube channel. But without any further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Mike and Robert. They have so much to talk about. I'm just going to try and shut up. So,
well, I'm just happy to be here, and I've just talking to Mike before the show. We love having him on our podcast. We are happy to have him here with the LabCoats audience because he knows what he's talking about. Mike with Altos Research and the data he's got, and just the insight that brings to the overall market. I'm excited about it. And so, Mike, if you want to tell us more about Altos and get us caught up to date at just where you're at and what the research we're seeing, then we'll jump into some topics. And Brian will have some questions too. And I'm here for backup. So.
Fabulous. So I'm Mike Simonsen. I'm the founder CEO of Altos Research. And at Altos, we track the active housing market. We watch every home for sale in the country every week, all the pricing, all the changes in pricing, and bubble up all the analytics into real-time data that our agents use to communicate to their clients. So here's what's going on in the market right now. And, I say over the years, I've said, like, there's only three questions in real estate. It's what's for sale, how much is my house worth, and how's the market? And at Altos, we do how's the market, and we help you answer how's the market. So, when clients are saying, they're saying, wow, I hear that it's a really tough market for buyers out there. You can answer that question with data. That's a how's the market question. Or they say, I hear it's cooling off. You can answer that question with data. Those are how's the market questions. And so those are opening questions. Those are lead conversion questions. Those are those opportunities to establish yourself as the expert in the market. So we got lots of data. We've been talking about, we can talk about national data today. If we have time, we can dive into local, different markets and see.
That's amazing, because I think a lot of people don't necessarily, and I hear this a lot, and I'm sure you guys do too, is, oh, my market's doing this. Well, the reality is there's very few unique markets right now. I'm not saying there's not any, because there are some, but overall, basically everybody's dealing with the same thing, right? And so I think it's amazing to take a look at this at a national level so that we can come up with a strategy, because yeah, one market's going to switch a little bit better, and that's another opportunity. I'm going to watch this market, it switch, so now I can copy what they're going to do. And I think I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's some of the data that you guys provide.
Yeah, for sure. And you're right. You're absolutely right that the national trends are everywhere. So, we had this crazy record low inventory. We had record high demand and that's been all price points, essentially all geographies across the country. It's been the same story. Now, at the same time, when you go into the local market, we do things like we do every market into 4 price ranges because the high end of the market may be behaving very differently from the low end. So you can look at your different price ranges in any zip code that you work. And, very often it might be the client who says, I want to overprice this house when I list because I want to see what I'm going to get for it. And you can say, well, in your price range, you can see that you're actually the slowest price range of the whole market right now. If you want to sell this house quickly, we should price it appropriately. And so you use the data to answer those kind of questions to position to actually, establish your expertise and make sure that your clients are making the great decisions along the way.
Awesome. Robert, any thoughts on that?
Well, again, Michael and I talked a little bit more about this, but I think really when you look at, hey, data, sometimes you're like, what am I going to be pouring over when it comes to data? How's it going to help me? But the truth is we have business plans. We want to have strategies, and the data is what powers that, right? And so you might want to talk about mindset. You might want to talk about other strategies in your business plan. Well, you're not going to be able to execute on those unless you have the right data. So just like Mike was talking about, when you're talking to a client, they want to know how their house is going to sell, what it's like in this market. You could try to just use, your expertise because you've been in the area for a while. But what's really going to give you a leg up is when you are the expert because you have the data delivered to you regularly and you actually know what's going on in the market, and not just say, well, because that house sold fast, your house is going to sell fast. Oh, it's a low inventory everywhere. So that means all I have to do is put a for sale sign in your yard and someone's going to buy it. That's a non-data approach to a low inventory market, right? The data is going to inform you on really how to help your clients. And so what an important topic and ways to actually execute and use what you can get from Altos.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's the next step. I mean, we've talked about some of the hypothetical, and everybody knows every market's a seller's market in the United States right now, and we all get that. So we haven't told anybody anything they don't know. But what we haven't talked about, and I'm sure we'll get there. Maybe we'll take the next step. Let's look at some of that stuff and how am I going to use it? So I'm on a listing appointment. What am I going to do with that data? Or I'm about to go on a listing appointment. What am I going to do with that data? How do I take that and walk in there, and so people go, wow, I don't know about anything else, but this guy really knows what he's talking about. Because at the end of the day, that's one of the things that as real estate agents, we don't always do. The really good agents do, but a lot of times people are in there and going, well, I'm going to put it on Facebook and I'm going to put it on Zillow, list with me. How do we show people how to be a little bit more persuasive, not just with their great personalities, not with their mindset, but with actual data? And so Mike, maybe we can talk about that and what's next there.
Yeah. So, with the question, the positioning question that I love the best with you take your Altos reports, and your Altos reports are local, they're branded for you, they're every Monday. So you got the brand new data out, and you go into the listing presentation, you put your market data, you put your market report at the top of the stack. And the first question is, are you a big geek or a little geek? Because if you're a big geek, I got all kinds of data for you. You can watch this, we can watch this. But even if you're just a little geek, I want you to look at one number. While we have your house listed, I can show you this. We have at Altos, we call it the market action index. It's like a speedometer. And this is a buyer's market, seller's market. It is the inventory, it's supply versus demand. So if supply picks up, but demand is really hot, that's still going to stay high. But if demand backs off, it starts to cool down. And so this thermometer moves. So if you're just a little geek, I'm going to put this this report in your inbox every Monday. And I want you to look at one number. If this number is falling while we have your house listed, that's the market giving us a signal that maybe that's cooling, maybe we overpriced that. And so we can let the market tell us while we have your house listed. So even though it's a seller's market right now, we also know that there's a lot of things in this market that could change quickly. If interest rates climb, buyers could get cold feet very quickly. If things like we're at the end of the mortgage forbearance process, there are 400,000 people who are going to have to start paying their loans this month. Do we know if they are starting to come to market? While we have your house listed, this speedometer is going to move while we have your house listed. So if you're a big geek, you're going to dive into this report and you're going to love it. And you're going to look at all the numbers and you're going to mouse over it. And you're going to zoom in. But if you're just a little geek, I want you to look at one number. And it's super powerful because then you've got the house listed. And if it happens, you've got 18 days on market as your average in your town. And all of a sudden we're at 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks. What did we do wrong? Now we can say, like now the client is looking at this report. I've been looking at this report, like you told me. I noticed this is ticking down. Brian, maybe we should get in front of this. Like, it puts the power into the client's hands to do things like suggest a price reduction. The market is telling us.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying, Mike, because here's the reality for the last 18 to 24 months, right? Like I was talking to somebody the other day and they're like, what's wrong with this house? It's been on the market for 3 weeks. And I actually, I verbally, I laughed out loud, like, the LOL part. Why? Because I remember 2008, 3 weeks, we hadn't even had a showing yet, let alone had it sold. And so all there's agents who've been in the market for 24, 36 months. And I'm not saying they're not great agents, but what they haven't experienced is this call. We need to reduce the price of your house. And so as the market will slow, and it's going to slow, I don't know when that's going to happen, but all three of us are going to say 100% going to slow. So you're taking that data and you'll be able to talk about it in a logical way versus the emotional way. And emotions work. I'm not against using emotions in sales. It's a big part of it, but it's nice to be able to say, guys, if this little meter, I think you described it, moves this direction, that means the market is slowing. And that means we might be chasing the market. Then maybe we should take an action. And it's so much better than, well, I feel like, well, this house sold over here. To use data to ask people, because what do we ask them to do? We're asking them to drop 20, 30, 40, $50,000. We're not asking them to save $500 here. So we have to know how to have these conversations. And I love that you gave us scripts and an idea of where to go with that. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's terrific. It's as the market may change, or at some point does change.
It will.
There's some really fascinating stats that we track that are very powerful. They're leading indicators for where transaction prices are going to be in the next 2, 3, 6 months down the road. We can track, for example, the percentage of homes on the market that have taken a price reduction. And when you look nationally, about 35% are overpriced. Sometimes that's accidental. Sometimes it's a crazy seller, whatever the reason is. Sometimes it's strategic, right? It is 35%, and then are overpriced. Then they take a cut and they sell. That's sort of rule of thumb normal. Some markets it's higher. Some markets, some of the hot California markets, it's lower. But what happens is when the market heats up, 35% think they're overpriced, but some of those offers they come through, right? So only maybe 30% need to take a price cut, or 28 as it starts to heat up. And so what we saw over the last year is when the market really heated up, end of last year, we could see, 35% thought they were overpriced. And then all of a sudden, really 25% had taken a price cut. Then we started in January, and now all of a sudden it's 20%. By April of this year, when we hit the peak of the frenzy, was March and April, it was only 15% nationally of all the listed homes had taken a price cut. And 35% thought they were overpriced. Right. So it was so hot. So now we can watch that, like, now it's about 20, it's climbed back up to 27, 28%. It's that time of year. So it's the fall. It didn't sell by school started. So a couple more will take their cut to move it now. Then by the holidays, if it's still on at Thanksgiving, more and more will take a cut. So you'll see this normal yearly cycle. But we're still hotter than normal. And so one of the signals that we can look at with our clients or just for ourselves to know, wow, is it cooling? Or it's cooling, but it's cooling from white hot to, just Arizona summer to it's like, it's like we can watch the percentage of price reductions. And it's a really powerful indicator of how competitive it is with buyers. We can watch the percentage of homes that are getting relisted. So there's always a couple percent that come off the market, they get withdrawn or a contract falls through, and then they get relisted. When markets start to cool appreciably, and we started this company, I started Altos Research in 2006. And so we could watch the Silicon Valley market when the subprime bubble burst. All of a sudden, contracts started falling through at the subprime, and you could watch the low end of the market started getting relisted. They'd come off and they looked like they were sold, but they get relisted. And so, we can see there's usually a 1 or 2% that are getting relisted, but in a cooling market, all of a sudden it's 3, 4. And so that's a signal to start seeing, especially there's a lot of us who, there's a lot of bears, like really bearish, like investors who think the market's going to crash. They think there's a bubble. There's a lot of those folks out there. And the question I always have for them is like, they've been waiting with their cash. The question is like, how long are you going to wait? Right.
Right. You just missed 25% appreciation last year and a half, right?
Right, exactly. And so, look, I can tell you right now that, only 1.4% of the homes are getting relisted. That's because those deals are going through, they're well funded. And so, this is not a market that is ready to burst, like a bubble that's ready to burst. There's no signals of that anywhere, but it's a conversation we have all the time.
Absolutely. A couple of questions, and Robert, you could share too, like what we might do with some plans and strategies. I'm going to flip this thing on its head just for fun because that's what I like to do. So one of the things that happened during the spring, you said April was the peak, and I was seeing the same thing in my markets that I work in. But here's the question for you: there was a whole bunch of people who tried to buy a house in April who didn't. So what are you doing with that data, if you will, to talk to those people? Because I personally believe, and this is anecdotal at best, so I love data, guys, that those are the people who we need to get back in touch with. Those are the people but we also need to know how to have the conversations because they don't believe us. Like I call you up and say, hey, Mike, I know you tried to buy a house in April, but it's only 5 months later, but everything's fine now. You're going to be like, yeah, whatever, Brian. You're just looking, you just need another deal, right? So what kind of data can we talk to them about? And how can I use something like Altos? And how can I use maybe, use RedX to put those two things together, maybe even?
Yeah. So in that conversation, what I like to do is that market action index, that speedometer, you go, look, it was at 99 on a scale of 100 in April. We're down to 60. Like it's still hot, but what that tells us is that there's far fewer, the fewer bids, like there's more opportunity. We can see the inventory climbing. And so we see that curve climbing. You have more opportunity and you have, so as a buyer, especially the first-time buyers got really bid out early this year, and they're starting to win some of those deals, right? They're starting to get a little opportunity right now. It's loosened up a little bit. And so I, in fact, had this conversation with a buddy of mine who has been looking, I'm in San Francisco, and he's been looking to buy a second home in Hood River, Oregon for years. And he waited and it wasn't right. And then this year things go nuts, prices go nuts and inventory falls. And he said, man, I missed my window. And so the other day I said, I'm like, hey, inventory in Hood River is climbing again. The market action index is backed off. And like, I'm not a realtor. I'm just sending him the data. Like you should. And it was so funny. His reaction was, oh, it's going to crash. I missed my window again. And now he thinks he misses window again. So I mean,
it's always a no, huh?
It's always a no. It's always a miss my window. But it's like, let me show you. Okay, it's not crashing, but it is, if you were worried, like you ran into craziness and you got outbid by 19 other people in April, like it's a different market now. It's still hot. You still got to make the right offer at the right time, but these are deals that can get done. So those are the kind of things that I like to show you. Here's the inventory curve, and here's the market action index, and here's price reductions. We're like climbing up, and 33% of the homes in Hood River have had price reductions. That's because they were trying to get and they didn't have offers. So like that is signal that we can use to communicate along the way.
Absolutely. Robert, I think you had something to share.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Mike just gave the perfect example of what the best realtors are doing right out there right now, and how you'd use this data to help those clients that didn't get a home 5-6 months ago. Because we know our top realtors, what they're doing is they're adding value all the time, right? It's not always about an ask. It's not always about closing the sale every single time you talk to someone. It's about adding value. And one of those ways you add value is over the last several months. So not just today, but that you keep them informed on what's going on in the market. Whether you have a newsletter, whatever it is, whatever your follow-up strategy is, that they're in your, if they're in your RedX system, if they're in whatever follow-up system that you have, that you are reaching out to them and you're providing value. And the best value you can give them is, hey, here's what's going on in the market. And hey, remember back in July, I told you it hadn't cooled off yet or wasn't ready. Since I've constantly been telling you that, now I'm ready to tell you, yes, this is the update. Now we're ready. And they can believe you because you told them, months ago, you kept them in the know and weren't trying to close them yet. And so it's not this out of the nowhere phone call or email, however it is you're updating them in your follow-up strategy, but you've been providing value over the months, and great value really comes from, I know my stuff and I don't just know it. I'm sharing this report with you. You watched it with me. Remember in July, it wasn't good. Now, today it is good. So let's get you back in looking at homes. And I mean, that's the way that you use this, and don't get out of habit just because for a couple months it was easy to close a deal, or, if you could get a listing that it was going to sell, you don't want to get out of habit of these really good habits that we know work. And that's providing this value, regular follow-up, using your data, using your contact list, using your sphere, over and over again, and don't get lazy just because the market got easy, right? And so that's what I'd have to say to that. And Mike just walked you right through it, even without being a realtor, just talking about the data, exactly how it tells that story. So, yeah.
Robert, the one of the interesting things, one of the beauties of market data is that it's always fresh. And it's always automatic. So, I talked to you in April and I said, I'm a first time buyer and I can only put 5% down. And you're like, maybe you should take a couple of months, relax right now. And I'm going to put this report in your inbox every Monday. I want you to look at one number, right? And so you give it the same thing to your buyer. Now you are in touch with them, with the data, every Monday. And it's an automated, drip, and you can go every week. And it's remarkable how many of those, reply with, hey, Brian, thanks for the info today. Like it feels very personal, or hey, Brian, wow, I noticed this is starting to come down. Are there going to be opportunities this fall? Oh, you pick up the phone, or, in our case, we do things like, we send you a text when Robert is reading Brian's report. So, you pick up the phone and you go, Robert, I don't know if you've been looking at these reports that I've been sending you, but
even though I saw you just open it 30 seconds ago.
Even though I just opened it, yeah, exactly. It's as far as like that kind of value, and like, we talked, it was probably not the right time. But you probably want to buy sometime in the next year. So let me put this in your inbox every Monday, and you just like drop the email in there and here's the zip code, and like there you get it. And then meanwhile, they forward the report to their friend, and now your friend is lead, drops into the inbox, right? So like your sphere grows, the lead conversion in the content itself
Absolutely. As I was sitting here thinking about this, as you guys are talking about it, I would add this. I'm sure Altos going to go out, shows up in my email box Monday morning. I'll tell you the other thing I would do on Sunday night, or whenever you're going to send these out, I'd do some sort of bomb video that drops with it. Hey, just wanted to let you know, Mike, I've sent you this report. I noticed these 3 interesting data points that you might want to take a look at. If you have any questions, give me a call. And you don't have to use that person's name. You can make that report. You can make that bomb. You can send it to 1,000 people. But I think that adds that just little bit extra touch point when you send a video about the report. And realistically, what does it take? If you look at these reports every week, it's to take you a minute and a half to make that video. So, don't be afraid to use video. And those of you guys who know me know that I say that to everybody all the time. And it's the thing. Like, it's an opportunity that we didn't have 20 years ago, and people are scared to death of it, and they're missing out to take a product like this and take it to the next level. So, yeah. And I want to say this before I let you guys talk, just real quick. If you guys have questions, those of you guys are watching, please put them in the Q&A, because we will answer those, or put them in the chat. Back to you, Mike. Sorry.
Yeah, great. I was going to say the other way to do that same kind of conversation, like here's a couple of data points, is we like to do an Altos integration right into your CRM. So lead comes in, lead goes through, like in Vortex in RedX, for example. Now the lead is here, and their Altos report gets a link right inside the CRM. And so now I've got them on the phone for whatever reason, and I click on the Altos report link, and I say, oh, in Irvine, inventory is ticked up this week. I don't know if you've seen the report, but and the stats are all right there in front of you. So every person in your database has their Altos report, that while you're on the phone, or one of the people on your team, you don't have to be an expert in every corner of every market. You go click, and while they're on the phone, and you can work the data right into your script. So same kind of conversation, right? As doing it in video.
Yeah, and now if I can be selfish, because I have my own question, because I mean this just interests me, right? Like the headlines over the last week, even in non real estate news or news sources, are talking about, hey, is the market slowing down, and what are we going to see as forbearance maybe actually ends? And those are two things, Mike. I know you're watching the data. So we've talked about the strategy, the theory of really how you implement this data on a daily basis, but you're looking at the data all the time. I'm just so interested. I think our audience would be interested to know, what are you seeing finishing out 2021, going into 2022? Are we going to slow down anytime soon? Is forbearance going to hit ever? What does the data say?
Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot of meat there. So let's start with this. So inventory is at record low levels. And it has been, what's interesting is inventory has been declining nationally for a decade. Each year we have fewer and fewer homes for sale. And that's primarily because, really two big reasons, but we've been underbuilding. So we've been, since the housing crisis, we've underbuilt by several million homes, and we're only now starting to get back to historical levels of building each month. We're millions of homes behind. So that's one. But the other one is really fascinating, is in the last decade, mortgage rates have averaged 4% for a 30-year fix. And because mortgage rates have been so cheap, it's been really a good time to own multiple houses. When I go to trade up or move down, it's when my rate is at 2.7% on both of these houses, I keep the first one for an investment property. And it happens more and more. And the lower rates go, the more common that's become. It's a good deal. And so what's happened is that, so we've now, and then rates fell super far this year, and inventory fell right along with it. And people were buying second homes, and they were just gobbling up everything because it was such a good deal for long-term, for 30 years at 2.7% is like mind blowing. So So in the next few years, we see that inventory is going to stay restricted. It's going to stay a tight market until we have several years of higher interest rates. So it has to be less affordable to hold both houses. And then they will start to sell, the second one will come to market. It'll be, you can't refinance into a lower payment, like all of those things. So, and so the first thing that happens as rates rise, we'll see demand back off a little bit, but you'll also see supply increase. And then it'll take several years. So normally this time of year, we'd have 1 million or so homes on the market, single family homes across the country. We've got 436,000 right now. And so, and that's because, 6 years ago, it was 1.2 million, and then it was 1.1 million, and then it was 988,000. And each year it ratchets down. And so number one, it's going to take several years of higher rates before enough people have more expensive mortgages. The other thing that's happening is that the millennials are in their late 30s, their peak earning and home buying years. And we've got 4 or 5 years of the millennials moving in. So we've got restricted supply and elevated demand from demographics for 5 years, that kind of range. So in general, that's what we're looking at. And so that's why we are where we are with inventory nationally now. And it's also why there aren't any signals that it's going to surge. When we look at the forbearance, so there are still 1 million or so homes that are in the forbearance process. They haven't paid their mortgage for some amount of the pandemic period. What's interesting though, so the bearish story, and I hear it all the time, I hear it every day on Twitter and YouTube and things like that. The bearish story is that these people can't make their mortgage payment, and there's 400,000 of them, and they're gonna all have to sell at one time. And what it turns out though is that throughout the year, almost none of the folks in forbearance have had to sell their homes. Almost none, couple percent. And the reason is, it's a really good time to not sell your house, like to own your house. It's a really good time. And so people are figuring out everything they can do to stay in their house. And there are some folks who, for example, maybe went from 2 incomes to 1 income permanently, and therefore that mortgage is going to be chronically unaffordable. But so they'll choose to sell. Some of those are going to come to market. But they won't be distressed because they had a 10% equity gain last year, another 12% this year. Like everyone in the country has massive equity in their homes, record levels of equity, gaining trillions of dollars. And so they may choose to sell, take the cash, but or maybe they're going to do their loan mod. Most of them are doing some kind of loan mod, figuring it out. And what's fascinating is, if you didn't pay your mortgage for 14 months and that all gets tacked onto your loan, you still ended up that 14 months with more equity because your home price went up.
So, and let me ask you this, Mike, because this is the question I get, and I've been arguing with people because I guess I argue, but that yes, we are going to have some inventory hit the market, like you're saying. I don't see a foreclosure rush. What are you guys seeing at Altos?
Zero. There were 0 foreclosures because foreclosure requires a bad loan that I can't pay and I'm underwater. No one in the country is underwater, and nobody in the country has a bad loan.
It's not 2006 where flood-the-mirror loans, right?
They're all good loans. They're amazing loans. They're historically crazy. Like, Brian, I like you, but I wouldn't trust you with 30 years at 2.7%. Like, that's an amazing loan.
Back at you. We're good. Not offended about it. All right, we got a couple of questions.
0 foreclosures,
Okay.
Some selling. And for agents, like, the conversation is, like, if you're thinking about it, if you've been in forbearance and you're thinking about it, like, it's a good time to capture your equity cash. So it's a terrific time, if you had a second home and you weren't paying that loan and now you're deciding what to do, like it is a really good time to sell that property. But most of those folks are like, they are renegotiating into a lower payment. And so it's really like zero foreclosures and no short sales because nobody's underwater.
Yeah, you can't be short. You can't short sale if you're not short, right?
That's
so
right.
A couple of quick questions that we have. Both of these are from Lori. I'm going to do my best to understand the first question. So Lori, if I don't get it right, type it in the box again and correct me. But it seems like when you were talking about interest rates need to go up for inventory, it seems like a promo for higher rate to bring inventory to the market. What's going to, if and when, because my crystal ball is kind of broken right now, but if and when interest rates go up, what's that probably going to do to the inventory? And it's only one of the factors. I mean, it's not a standalone thing, but if you might want to talk about that. And then the other question is talking about the people who come after the millennials. So, I don't even know what that gen called, Gen something or other. I'm a Gen Xer, nobody cares about us. So what?
Me too. So, I'm not arguing either way for whether rates should go up or down, nor am I able to predict where rates are going to go. I'd say
we'd be very wealthy if we could, right? We'd be
exactly. I wouldn't be selling real estate data. I'd be trading interest rates, right? I bought my first home in 1996, and I locked in my 8.25% rate for 30 years because I was afraid.
Excited about it, right?
Right? Exactly. I bought my second one in 2001, and I locked in my 6.5 for 30 years. And then each time I keep doing it, right? And so I have no idea where rates are going to go. But I do what we can see is the impact of what rates have. So, for example, there was in 2018, rates went from like 3.5% to 4.5% during 2018.
Yep.
And you could absolutely see the impact on demand and the impact on inventory. So, I mentioned that inventory has been falling every year over year for the decade. Actually, between 2018 and 2019, it ticked up a little bit that year while rates went up. And then rates fell again, and then we're back to our normal cycle. So, you can see it. What we don't know right now is, so that one 3.5 to 4.5, where 4 is our long-term average. What we don't know is now, what's that threshold where people start getting cold feet? Is it 3? Is it 3.5? Is it 4 and 4.5 like it was before? We don't know how soon we see it, but you can actually see the impact.
Absolutely. I remember that little blip in 2018. As a realtor, I freaked out. I was like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Because everything had been really good. And it literally was it felt like a day and a half. It was a little longer than that, but it kind of felt that way.
Yeah.
So, and what about the next generation? So, it's funny because everyone talks about millennials. Oh, millennials aren't buying. Well, first of all, millennials are buying. So get over that. And then, what about the I guess Gen Z, I think
Gen Z. Yeah. There's certainly, so what's interesting, Brian, is you and I are Gen X, right? We hit our peak buying years, 2008. There's fewer of us than there have been in any other generation.
Yep.
And so, what a surprise. All of a sudden, there's fewer people and at peak buying age and all the markets. So Gen Z is not quite as big as the millennials, but it's certainly bigger than Gen X. So we have the millennials demand, and then we have a reasonable size, it's still population growing, it's a reasonable, but it is, the surge is with the millennials that we'll see in the next few years.
I appreciate that, and that's what I'm hearing right now. And so, yeah, everyone who believes that millennials don't buy houses, you should stop believing that, because that is 100% not true. And they're the biggest group buying houses right now, right? That's the biggest
they
group
all
ever.
decided to buy at the same time. That's
Yeah,
good.
they all said, screw it. We don't want to be classified this way. We want to do whatever we want, which is what they said all along the way anyway.
That's right.
So if you're a millennial, I'm sorry if I've insulted you, but the reality is they're not any different than the rest of us. They're just waiting to get into their prime peak, kind of like Mike said. So I really appreciate that. We've got about 5 minutes left. I want to make a couple of quick announcements. So first of all, watching, Altos is running a special deal for us today. We appreciate you guys doing that, Mike. And what it is you go to altosresearch.com and there's a coupon code is just RedX 21. So RedX 21 gets you 1 free month and you can try it out. The worst thing happens is you get some really great data. So, go try out their product, take a look at it. And it is a good product. I've used it and lots of great stuff from it. And as the more we're thinking about it, I think we've gotten away from using data, but we didn't have any time to use data, which seems insane. But here's another question that I was kind of thinking of. So I had a coaching client call me up and say, I'm losing to these FSBOs because they can sell their house immediately and they don't have to do anything. And I agree with that. My question is there a way using your guys' data to show them, hey, you can FSBO and sell your house in 15 minutes, but you're also going to lose 30 grand. And I know that's not the exact numbers, but is that some of this data that you guys can provide? Because that's a question. If I'm sitting in front of somebody, so why should I hire you? I can sell my house without you. And the truth is they're right. They can sell without you. Where's our value?
Right. The way I would probably approach the FSBO conversation is, is to point out that the percentage of homes with price reductions is climbing. And you go, look, you can do this. If you do it right, you're going to sell it, but you're the expert. You'll probably do it right. If it's wrong, here's what happens. You cut your price and it'll take time and you can see that that's climbing. This isn't April. So, I know that you just saw the headline last week that said, hey, the Case-Shiller is at record high levels. And, that Case-Shiller was reporting May numbers and, it's way backward. The headlines you're watching are way backward looking. So what you want to do is look at today's data, which is what I'm putting in front of you. And so, if you do your process right, you'll probably be just fine. It's still a pretty hot market. If you want, an expert, you know where to find me.
Yeah, I've been telling people, look, you'll sell your house, but here's the reality is that you're going to get 1 or 2 offers. If you work with one of our people on our team, you'll get 10 to 15 offers. And that doesn't mean you'll sell it for more, but there's an opportunity with more people to create a bidding war, ramp things up. And so I think it's important for people to understand, first of all, I'm doing some objection handling here. Don't tell them they're wrong. First of all, because they're right. The thing you have to do to sell your house is put a sign in the front yard. I mean, let's face that reality. Now, the thing you have to do to get the absolute most money in the most effective time period, that's different. But selling a house, a 12-year-old could do it. Pound, pound, pound. Okay, bring me an offer. I mean, that's the reality of the market we're in. And that's going to be that way for a little bit. So you've got to bring extra value. So but anyway, Robert, what kind of stuff are you guys seeing at RedX?
Yeah, what I was going to say is going back to the very beginning of our conversation, and that's where just because the market's hot, just because it's a low inventory market, don't get out of our habits, right? So if you're following up with clients, if you're still calling these FSBOs and providing value, showing that you are an expert, that you have real data and say, you know what, you're right, put that for sale sign in your yard. But hey, do you mind if I just email you just a couple of tips about selling your home and what the market looks like? And it doesn't take long for them to go, oh man, this guy knows what he's talking about, or hey, do you have all the disclosure information that you need? Are you sure you have that paperwork? I could show you where to find it. And they're like, oh, there's disclosure information I need to know. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh man, this guy knows what he's talking about. I think so yeah, just because the market's hot, just because a FSBO can sell their house, they can. You're right, they can. Doesn't mean we get out of our habits of making our phone calls, doing our follow-up, providing value. And if you keep doing that, then even the FSBO that knows they can sell their house will also understand, what you're talking about too, and you're going to be an option for them. So yeah, I just don't get away from our habits just because it's a low inventory market.
Well, and maybe the worst thing that happens is that guy needs a realtor to buy his next house. So maybe you don't get to sell it, but maybe he goes, Brian, you've given me all this information and data and all this great stuff, and you've been helpful all along the way.
Ta-da! So also, I wanted to before we go, we've mentioned the RedX 21 for the free setup, and I believe that you guys have a deal today too, Robert, with RedX. And for those of you who don't know what RedX is, Robert, give us the elevator pitch on what you guys do, so that people can decide if they might want to try your product, because it looks like we're going to waive the entire setup fee of $149 with that if you use the code we have today.
That's right. And you know what? You guys know what RedX is, but I'll remind you anyway. This is why I'm saying don't get out of your habits, because it doesn't matter what market you're in. You want to keep that pipeline full. You need to reach out to leads. You need to follow up with your sphere. And RedX provides the data and the tools to be able to do that. And, so you can get your leads from us, your expireds, your FSBOs, all of the above, your dialer, and keep track of them in our Vortex system. And then with your Altos Research, you just razzle dazzle them, because you're the expert now when you make that phone call. And yeah, you bet. Everyone listening today from LabCoatAgents, we waive that setup fee. And you can go to the link posted here and right there on the landing page, or you can give us a call and tell them that you heard us today, and they'll take care of you.
That's great. Brian and Robert, we get to this point in the conversation, and a lot of times the agents they're asking, can we look at my local data? Can we look at price reductions in my local? And so the answer is yes. And you can do that at altosresearch.com, and you just book a demo with our team, and we'll pull up your local data, and we'll work through the scripts on how do I take this to FSBOs, and we do that with folks all day long. Here's how you talk about the data. We have an ebook that they can read. So the answer is yes, let's look at your local data. Go to Altos, and we'll go dive in with you.
Awesome. So guys, we're at time. I'll start with you, Robert. Any final thoughts? And then we'll go to Mike.
No, my final thought is that I love listening to Mike, because he knows what he's talking about. Data is important, and adding value is important in today's market more than ever. And so if you want to be the expert, listen to what Mike has to say.
Good advice. Mike?
So I love the LabCoats community. I think I love the fact our favorite clients are those who are investing in their business, and they're working to provide value for their clients. And so it's always an exciting group to participate with. And so I love to see, that's why we created the coupon code for participants today, if they wanted to join and get the data and get rolling. Love to have you on board.
Awesome. Well, again, I've used both products, both great products, so I can personally say that they're good. That's not promotion. I'm not getting paid to say that. So I appreciate you guys, and it's a great product. So remember, try RedX. You waive that $150 setup fee. That's a great value. And take a look at Altos. You get to look at it for an entire month for free. What's the worst thing that happens? You're going to be a little bit smarter when you're done, be a little bit better agent. And let me say this again, this will be available on replay on our YouTube channel. Thank you so much, everybody, for chatting today. I've enjoyed the heck out of this. I'm a nerd, Mike, so I appreciate the nerd that we got to be a little nerdy today. And Robert, I appreciate you being here as well. Thanks, everybody, and have an amazing rest of your week.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Robert.